Welcome, everyone. I'm Penny Lewis, Executive Director of the Ecological Landscape Alliance, and I'll be the webinar moderator for Sustainable Business Practices for Landscape Professionals. This is one of the presentations we're offering in the Landscape Focus on Sustainability webinar series. This series was developed by a group of organizations known regionally for their quality ecological education. By collaborating on this series, the webinars expand the reach of our individual organizations. In case you're not familiar with the organizations, they're all nonprofit and largely volunteer groups in the United States. The regional groups are the Ecological Landscape Alliance, the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council, the Midwest Ecological Landscape Alliance, and Eco Landscape California. If you have a question for the presenter during tonight's program, you may ask it by typing in the question window at any time, and questions will be taken at the end of the presentation. And now I would like to introduce our presenter. Frank Crandall has more than 40 years of experience running a landscape design, construction, and maintenance firm specializing in sustainable, organically maintained landscapes. Additionally, Frank teaches business seminars and consults with horticultural firms. In addition to advising and speaking for the Northeast Organic Farming Association, Frank has been a guest lecturer at many colleges in the Boston area. He has also published 3 books that share his expertise and advice to help small horticultural businesses to become more focused, organized, and profitable. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Penny. Today's presentation is titled Sustainable Business Practices, and I would like to let you know that we are going to talk about business items that we need to look at, but as part of the talk, I'm also going to discuss personal strategies to help create a sustainable life. And I am a firm believer that these are all interconnected. So a brief outline of the topics that I will be discussing tonight. We're going to look at the business environment in 2016 and beyond. We're going to mention and describe the ingredients of a sustainable horticultural company. We're going to talk about organic land care opportunities and marketing tips. And I will finish with strategies for personal success, prosperity, and happiness. And at the end, we'll have a summary. I like to offer with all of my presentations objectives. What can you hopefully take from this talk tonight? And we will look at constructing your business plan using an understanding of the national and local economy, your values, your vision, and your ideas of how you would like to operate a business. Understand the importance of accurate estimating and job costing. Calculate your company's overhead and be able to set yearly profit goals. Use your financial statements as a tool to improve your business economic health. Pursue organic business opportunities. In this particular environment, there are great opportunities for increased revenue and profits, as well as doing things that are very beneficial to our environment. Use proven strategies to create a more successful, peaceful, and prosperous life and business. You are not here merely to make a living. You are here in order to enable the world to live more amply, with greater vision, and with a finer spirit of hope and achievement. You are here to enrich the world and to impoverish yourself if you forget the errand. That was written by President Woodrow Wilson in the 1915-1916. Very amped today. Let's look at horticultural business environment in 2016 and beyond. One of the factors, key factors in the success of any business, but particularly those in the horticultural field is the economy. And when we look back at 2007 to 2013, the Great Recession had a severe impact on a lot of businesses, including my own. In 2016, as we look at the key economic indicators, we see that the economy is improving, but with all of the uncertainty in our world today, a presidential election, we look at the worldwide economy, what's happening in China and Brazil, in England. These all impact how the economy is going to improve, be stable, or slide into another recession. When I made this slide, the stock market was at 18,500. I checked just a few minutes before coming on, and it's 18,144. We certainly can't look totally at the stock market to understand the economy, but I, for one, when I look at my business, which is a small landscape design, construction, and maintenance firm, dealing mainly with high-end clients with coastal properties, my gross sales definitely follow the market. And if I looked at my history of my business for the last 20, 30 years, I would see a graph pretty close to the way the market is. So we definitely want to keep an eye on the market, and if we see a deep drop sustained, then we can pretty much feel, maybe not immediately, but at some point it will affect our business. Housing, which is critical for a lot of horticultural businesses, has been increasing the last couple of years in price and the number of units that are being sold. And it's predicted in this year, 2016, housing building will be about 1.2 million units. At the height of the recession, that was down to about 500,000. So there are some positive indicators in the economy, but uncertainty is certainly something we have to be aware of. Competition. With the recession, in some areas there was a lot of increase with competitors, and a lot of low-bid competitors just trying to keep the doors open. When this happens, one of the key things that we have to keep in mind for a sustainable business is the need for marketing and sales. When we are in a position where we're competing against a lot of other landscape companies, we have to emphasize what makes us different, what makes us that much better. Why should you choose me as the company to do your landscape? And part of the marketing certainly explain what value added you bring to the job that you will do. Various training and awards that your company has won, and how many years you've been in business. I will give you a short example. A few years ago, I worked with a client to put together a landscape project and a proposal. And when it came time to go over the estimate, she was quiet after I discussed it. And she said, well, your estimate was $32,000 for this project. And it was a lot of planting, redoing the landscape, a stone wall, and some fencing and new lawn areas. She goes, and the other bid that I got was $22,000. And she looked at me and said, Frank, I'm going to go with you for several reasons. One, I really liked your presentation. And when you were putting this together, you found a couple of items that needed to be corrected that the other bidder did not. I know that you have other projects that you've done in the area, which I have always liked. I felt it was similar to what I wanted for my landscape. And I know that you've been in business for years. And the fact that your company has been recognized for various landscape awards over the years gives me a lot of confidence that you will do the best job. So I am giving you the project. So even though, you know, we are not necessarily the low bidder, there is great opportunities for us to succeed. It just really comes into the emphasizing why are you different and why are you better. A key comment that I'm going to be making throughout the presentation is that you need to know your costs. You cannot go into a project and give an estimate without knowing what your labor, your materials, your equipment, your overhead, any subcontractors that you're going to use, and materials. And we're going to look at ways to look at calculating these costs, and also we're going to distinguish between markups and margins, which I think you will find very helpful. Other points that we're going to stress: being efficient, focused, and organized. I do a lot of consulting with small businesses, and one of the primary areas that they need help in is establishing systems in place so that they can estimate, so that they can bill their clients, so they can do job costing and communicate with their clients. Having systems in place will certainly help you on the road to being sustainable. Also, particularly with, you know, although the economy is improving, making sure that you have the right size crew and that you have the number of vehicles and equipment you need, but not more than you need. And certainly the right number of employees. I can't say what that ideal number is. It will vary from company to company, but having, you know, the right amount and not going out and hiring 2 or 3 just because you have a big project is going to be important. One of the key elements and frustrations for those of us in the horticultural business is that for the most part we are seasonal. And when we look at our cash flow, I can pretty much predict for my company and similar companies when the best cash flow is going to be and when it's going to be at its lowest point. So it's important as you create and build your business that you be able to put together cash flow projections. And these projections should be done on a monthly basis. We'd like to put our projections together in January. We look at the past year and then looking ahead and compare, hopefully, to the actuals that we have generated previously. And we know from years of experience that some of the months, usually January, February, and March, the cash flow will be at its lowest, and we need to have in place either a credit line or money that we've been able to save, or as a last resort, credit cards. I've also found with a lot of my clients, good clients, long-term clients, that they are very willing to give advance deposits and prepayments in March, sometimes February, if they get just a tiny incentive, maybe a little bit of hourly rate reduction, and they are perfectly willing to prepay. And then the other part that is very significant is budgets. And a lot of companies, even some large companies, find that budgets either don't work or there are a lot of time spent and with little results. I firmly believe that if at the beginning of the season you have set budget goals and profit goals for your company, that having a budget will help you serve as a guide to get you where you want to go. Is the company going to stay exactly the way the budget is established? Probably not. But it is going to be helpful if one category is going much over where you expected, then at least if you can identify that early on, then you can make changes. And so that you don't end up at the end of December or early January and your accountant has your books and comes back with a surprise in terms of either you lost money or you made so much money that you owe a lot more taxes. It certainly can work both ways. Success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome. It's a very pertinent quote by Booker T. Washington. So let's look at ingredients of a sustainable business. As I mentioned, the most important thing before you put together an estimate or a proposal is know all of your costs. Before you put an estimate together, before you add personnel or buy that new piece of equipment, know your costs. And this is referring to labor, materials, vehicles, and equipment. And also how those additions and purchases will affect your bottom line. And let's take a look. So step one, to calculate the costs, we want to look at identifying total labor costs, material costs, equipment and vehicle costs, and overhead costs. I have to share with you a quick story about the first job I ever did as a full-time landscape company back in the early 1980s. And I had put an ad in the paper, and this gentleman not too far away called me and said, "Would you be interested in doing a project for me?" And I said, "Absolutely. It's my first job." So I went out, I met with him, and it was replacing and adding real railroad ties and doing some planting. Well, the real railroad ties are the ones that are dug up from railroad tracks, and they are huge. They are full of trap rock, and they are full of creosote. So I looked at the whole project, and when I was done, he said, "Now, do you have an idea what it would cost?" And without hesitating, I said, about $2,000. "Really? You sure?" I said, "Yep, 2,000. "Do you want me to give you a deposit?" "Nope, don't want a deposit. You just pay me in full when I'm done. And then he said, how long would the project take? And I said, probably 3 or 4 days. Really? Okay, you got it. It's your job. Go to it. 3.5 weeks later, I finished the project. I had gone through 2 chainsaws, about 10 chainsaw blades and chains. It was the most miserable, frustrating project I have ever done. Matter of fact, as the project became near to completion, I was seriously thinking about going back to teaching because nothing could be worse than what I was experiencing on this job. So the job finally came. I finished it. I was totally frustrated. The owner, who was, again, a great guy, he said, well, let me give you a check. And he goes, I think you might have underestimated the job. And I looked at him and I go, really? And he said, so I'm going to give you $3,400 because I know you spent a lot more time and effort for this job. Well, I thanked him. I went home and I sat down and figured out all of the labor, the materials, the equipment, everything. And the job should have been $13,600. So my absolutely horrible experience taught me something that day that I have never forgotten, and certainly follow this procedure for every job that I do, and that is to know what all of my costs are, and before I make any kind of proposal. And I also request a 50 or 60% deposit, and if it's an extremely large job, we would do 40, 40, 20 with a 40% mid-payment and then 20% when it's done. But the point of the story is that you have to spend the time to figure out what your costs are. So let's take a look, labor costs. I have developed a spreadsheet that identifies all of the labor rate, all of the costs, the FICA payments, the state unemployment, IRAs. All of these are figured on the spreadsheet. So when I look at 1, 2, or 3 employees, I can calculate what the total cost for the year will be, as well as the billable hours that I will get from them. And this will allow me to measure how much money each employee will generate. So let's say that we have 3 employees, so the projected labor costs for 1 year would be $90,000, and the projected yearly hours, let's say 1,500 each, is 4,500 hours. So the average hourly labor cost is around $20 an hour. That's taking the $90,000 and divided it by the 4,500 hours. And then we look at, and this is a decision you have to make based on your company, mark up that labor. So at $20 times 2 would be $40 an hour, 2.5 would be 50, 3 would be 60, and whatever amount seems appropriate for your company. I also found that it's really important that you not have just one straight billable rate for every position in your company. We had maintenance crews, we had construction crews, we had designers, we had masons, and all of these were at a different hour. The next cost that we want to take a look at are vehicle and equipment costs. one of the first things when I meet with a small company is how much does each piece of equipment and vehicle cost you? And there aren't too many that immediately have that information, although some do. So we look at this spreadsheet and figure out for each piece of equipment what the cost is and what the charge should be for that equipment. So let's say we have a 1-ton dump truck that initially costs $38,000. So for our company, or most companies that I deal with, an average of 40 weeks times 5 days a week, it would be about 200 days per year. And the typical period that we can expense that truck out is 5 years. So that's a total of 1,000 days of usage. And that cost would be $38 per day. But we know there's a lot more involved than just paying for the vehicle. Maintenance, insurance, license, taxes, registration, and depending on what kind of drivers you have, repairs. So for the 5 years, we're looking at around $26,000, and divide that by 1,000 days, and we come up with $26 per day. Fuel and oil, this chart was actually made a year or two ago when fuel was more expensive. You can figure it at whatever you want, but I strongly urge you to be a little bit higher than the current rate, because all it takes is OPEC, as they have decided, to cut back production, and the price of crude oil goes up, and all of a sudden we're paying $1 more a gallon than we were yesterday. So that's $28 per day. So the total cost per day for this vehicle is $92. If you can recoup that $92, you will break even and meet your expenses. But we like to treat vehicles and equipment as employees, and we want them to make money for us, not just break even. So we add something called replacement value, and you could put whatever you want in for a new vehicle that you might purchase 5 years from now, but let's say $40,000. So that would be an additional $40 per day. So the total charge per day for that 1-ton dump would be $132. So when you're putting an estimate together for a project and you're going to be there 3 days, then you need to incorporate this 3 times 132 for your trucking cost. All of the equipment would be treated the same way. If we look at a riding lawnmower, the cost would be $72 that you would need to recoup. And the 200-gallon power sprayer, you could put in here an aerator or a sod cutter as an example. And with the same treatment, notice that the cost per day for the sprayer, and this could be a sod cutter, was based on being used 40 days per year. Well, let's say that that sprayer or sod cutter only gets used 20 days per year. Then that would bring that cost at the bottom to like $194 a day, which is a considerable amount. So this column really demonstrates to us that maybe rather than buying a sprayer or a sod cutter, that we would rent it. And that rental fee plus a markup would then be what you would charge the customer. Overhead cost and allocation. Small business, really small businesses tend to think, well, overhead isn't really that important. But in reality, it is. And what I have done over the last 3 or 4 years is develop a spreadsheet to calculate your overhead and to be able to have you input what profit margin you would like to make in the upcoming year, and then it will calculate what the gross sales that you need to achieve to earn that profit margin. And one of the key things about overhead, it really needs to be fully paid before you begin to make a profit. And in most cases, maybe October, companies complete paying or come close to their overhead so that whatever they bring in November and December is actually what their profit is going to be. So let's take a look. Overhead costs, when you think of overhead, all of the things that are not directly related and billable to a job, advertising, depreciation, all of your office, bookkeeper, and whatever benefits and insurance. When you look at printing costs, professional fees, your lawyer, your accountant, rent that you pay, any repairs, taxes, telephone, travel, and interest expense. These expenses all need to be recovered in the course of your business fiscal year before you can make a profit. The overhead and profit, I'm just going to give you some sample calculations. These are on the spreadsheet where you would put in the total direct costs. That would be purchases and direct labor, and in this example was $320,291. And then overhead, which is your operating expenses, in this case $139,935. So when these are calculated, your overhead recovery, overhead divided by total direct costs, is 44%. And let's say you want to achieve a profit margin for the year of 25%. Well, this form will calculate that the gross sales that are needed are $613,635, giving you a profit of $153,000, which is 25%. Now, let's say when you finish these calculations that you realized, you know, 600,000 is a little beyond, I think, what I can project. So you change the profit goal to 20%, and whatever that adjusted figure is will be calculated for you. So you have flexibility. You're able to put in whatever number you want to try, and it will give you what the gross sales are. A concept that I made a huge difference for me that I learned probably 15, 20 years ago is the difference between markup and margin. And it is very important that you establish margin goals for your business and for each of the facets of the business. And we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to look at a couple of examples of markup and margin. Markup basically is the percent that is added to the cost of what you purchase something at to give you a retail selling price. The margin is going to be the selling price minus the cost divided by the selling price, and that will give you the profit margin. Let's look at an example. Let's say you buy a large rhododendron and it costs you $50, and you want to mark it up 100%. So you multiply the cost, which is $50 times 2, gives you $100 for the selling price. Well, now we want to determine the margin. So we take the selling price minus the cost, divide it by the selling price. So we take $100 minus 50, which is 50, divide that by the selling price of 100, and we come up with 50%. So if you go down the column to where it has the markup 100%, the margin is 50%, and you multiply the cost by 2 to give you the 100% markup. And I think the more you look at these and try these, you will see that this is very significant and will help you. Estimating and job costing. I know that most every company has a way that they estimate, but hopefully they develop an estimating system. And you need to know your overhead in order to do that, as well as all of your costs. A few years ago, I developed an estimating system. It's a spreadsheet Excel program, and it has databases, and I'm able to create an estimate in the program in a matter of minutes, and it saves so much time. But estimating is only part of it. When a job is done, particularly projects, you need to do job costing, because you need to know whether the job, number one, made money, did it achieve the profit margin that you had originally set up, and it's how you learn. Because if you had a 20% profit margin and after job costing you realize that you made 7%, then there's obviously something that happened. More than likely, the estimate was a little bit low on labor. That seems to be the biggest issue when it comes to job costing. So let's take a quick look at landscape estimating. We're going to look at a simple retail estimating method using direct costs, overhead, and profit, and then quickly talk a little bit about discounting. A typical retail method, you would list all of the plants, materials, equipment, and labor, and the direct cost is exactly what it will cost you. And then this form shows allocated overhead, and this was used for this example where plants were allocated 65, materials 50, equipment 68, and labor 85. And the overhead amount that was generated is listed there. And then a column called true cost. True cost is the direct cost plus overhead. And if we did the job for $4,296, that would mean we would break even. But we do want to make a profit. So we add 35%, and it gives you the profit amount, which is $1,504, and the selling price, $5,800. So if we want to look at the profit margin, as we did in the previous discussion, we take the selling price, $5,800, minus the true cost, $4,296, and that gives us the profit of $1,504. If we divide that by the selling price, $5,800, and multiply it by 100, we get a 26% profit margin. So that's the goal for that particular job. Just quickly, discounting, if the selling price is discounted by 10%, the new profit margin is 18%. If a project was discounted, and I'm not recommending this, but I'm showing you what can happen, a 20% discount would reduce the profit margin to 7%, and that's a 19% reduction in the profit of the original proposal. The reason I show you this is sometimes you get put in a situation where the client will say, you know, I got another estimate. If you can discount 10 or 20%, you got the job. Well, if I was doing this and they wanted 20% and that meant a 7% profit margin, I would decline because it would take just one mess up and you'd end up losing money with the job. Job costing factors you need: detailed job reports, accurate labor, equipment, vehicle hours, materials, everything that you use in the project. And a spreadsheet with estimate and actuals, which I'll show you in the next slide. The job costing summary shows cost overruns and shortages with a new profit margin. Why do we do job costing? We do it for a couple reasons. One, we want to improve the way we estimate and make money, and we need to share all of this information with our crew members so that they know why a particular job didn't work out and become as profitable as possible. And they might have some great suggestions on how to improve it for the future. This is a job costing summary spreadsheet listing all of the direct costs, what the contract amount was, and what the actual direct cost was, and the adjusted retail billing, and what the difference would be. In this case, the project was contracted at $5,800. It actually was adjusted retail for $6,088. If you were signed a contract for $58, then you're going to lose $288. If you have a good understanding with the client that if there were some additional plants put in, obviously it should be adjusted in the final payment, which would add $288. So when we look at the direct cost, the overhead is the same, and we find that the profit is now $1,364, and go through the same procedure minus the true cost and divide it by the selling price. The profit margin is now 24%. The estimate was 26%. I would be happy with that minor reduction. It's when you get dramatic changes where it goes from 26 to 5 or you lose money, then you know you have to make some adjustments. Sales projections and budgets. Let's take a quick look. One of the things that I thoroughly believe in is making calculations and on spreadsheets for the gross sales that you have in each month, really for the last 2 or 3 years, so that when it comes time at the end of the season, you can look at what changes you are making, are you doing a marketing plan, and then you can begin to comfortably make future projections for the upcoming year. One more thing that I'd like to briefly mention would be a budget. And a budget is not that scary thing to implement. And first you would look at your P&L, and actually I would like to compare the last two. And then for the projection for the upcoming year, go line by line and come up with ways, is this category going to be more expensive this year or the same or less? And based on the projections for your cash flow, you can begin to get a feel for what areas you might be able to increase. and go down all of the categories on your P&L, and you might have to tweak this several times. But when you're comfortable, then that becomes your guide for the upcoming year. Budgets are not necessarily going to be held right to the exact dollar, but it is a guide. It gives you help. And if you see a category going way over what you projected, then you make the change rather than waiting till the end of the year and your accountant has the information and says, by the way, you lost $5,000 this year. We want to be proactive. A little bit about organic land care, and then we'll go into a little bit about how to achieve personal success. Opportunities for organic landscaping and lawn care have increased tremendously in the last 10 years, and mainly because client demand. They really do not want to have a lot of harmful chemicals being used on their properties, particularly with, you know, their pets and their children. A lot of residential organic work. The photo here is a client that we take care of in Weekapaug, Rhode Island, and it's been organic for probably the last 4 or 5 years. And plant health care and the use of native plants all are increasing dramatically. When transitioning from traditional to organic services, there are hybrid programs that typically are used, and then after a 2 or 3 year transition period, and then the properties are totally organic. There are a lot of businesses that have run mixed business where they have an organic division and a traditional division. There are challenges, I will be the first to admit, and having good advisors and consultants that can help you with that transition are extremely important. There are myths about organics that they will not work and that they are too expensive. A quick example, we took over a coastal property lawn and landscape 3 years ago, and the client was very displeased with the way the lawn looked. And the first thing that we did was do a soil test, and then did an organic renovation. And based on the soil test, we did aerating, we did organic fertilizing, we did overseeding, and then added top dressing of 1/4 inch of compost. And we did that 2 years, and always in September, ideal time to overseed a lawn. And that lawn went through the whole summer. It does have a sprinkler system, but with minimal amounts of organic fertilizing, and the lawn spring, summer, and fall has just recovered. It's become sustainable, and the client certainly could not be happier. And yes, there was considerable expense for the overseeding and renovation the last 2 years, but now the costs are actually going to be less than what a traditional lawn care would be. So if the client knows there's an initial amount that's being paid, but then eventually the cost will be at or below, then I think they'll be happy. Another example, if you're ever in Newport, Rhode Island, go down to Rough Point, one of the castle homes in Newport. They They have 7 acres of lawn. They make their own compost tea and apply it twice a year. They have not used herbicides or insecticides since 2004. There are a few weeds, and periodically they do overseeding, but here's a good example of even a large property that can be organic. Just a few marketing and sales. If you're going to sell a comprehensive organic lawn care program, it has to involve soil tests, and it's not just a 4-step program. And you need to discuss with the client their expectations before you finalize the project. And certainly soliciting referrals and testimonials will help you to grow this end of your business. And having a marketing packet available to distribute to new clients would be great. We do a lot of our advertising now with social media, Facebook. We don't do Twitter to contact potential customers. PR, public relations, if you're doing something unique and different, go to your local newspaper editor. They would be thrilled to run something special and unique. Civic marketing, we do a lot with local charities and golf tournaments, and try to give back to the community. And public, commercial, both are great sources of lawn care. All right, as we finish up the presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about strategies for personal success, prosperity, and happiness. We can have a sustainable business, but equally important is to have a sustainable life. And if there isn't a balance between the two, we're never quite going to achieve the things we would like to. Living in the moment. 2004, I was very frustrated. I was yelling at employees, and just little things would, really set me off running a business. So I was recommended to try meditation. Well, I have to tell you, since September of 2004, meditation changed my life. It changed the way I acted as an owner of a business. And to this day, I feel that meditation, being able to slow my busy mind and being able to appreciate the now, being in the moment. And how do you get back to being in the moment is simply begin to listen to your breath. And this is carried over into so many things that I do. I do pay attention to my breathing. If I feel I'm getting a little upset, then I go into 5 cycles of 4-4-8 breathing. Breathe in on the count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for 8, and I immediately will be relaxed. And in reality, being mindful. And this helps in so many ways with our lives, personal lives, as well as business. The power of attitude. If you wake up every day with a negative attitude, or you have many employees that have negative attitudes, it's going to be a problem for you to achieve the success that you want to. I always try to be positive. I try to be encouraging, and I know that when people talk to me, if they try or they're being negative, I immediately switch over to positive comments and thoughts, and in some cases ignore negative comments. And in my business over the years, I have made a conscious decision that really, really negative people are not going to fit with my business philosophy and vision and the way I run my business. And over the years, in the off season, I have let several people go. because it's not part of what I would like to achieve. And you need to create a vision. What is your grand strategy for your business as well as for yourself? And I found that when I, about 8-10 years ago, wrote down my vision and my goals and shared it with the company as well as those close to me, amazing things began to happen. And I began to achieve the goals because people in the business now knew where I was going and how I was going to achieve that. Every January I review, I have about 25, 26 goals that I write down, and then I review them again in January. Those that have been achieved come off the list, new ones come on. If some are ongoing, they stay with an update, and it's amazing what you're able to achieve if you write down your goals. I never would have been able to write 3 books without having that vision and those goals. Embracing change. We all know that things today and tomorrow and 2 months from now are going to be different. And in this political climate, in this economic climate, in this environmental climate, we really have to anticipate that things are going to be different. And we need to make changes in order to thrive. And I think the more we can anticipate and embrace change, and we will find new opportunities and be able to succeed where others who do not adapt are just really going to fall by the wayside. By the way, a great little book, Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. It'll take you about 30 minutes to read, and I know it had a great effect on my life. And one of my clients told me it saved his life because he realized he was the problem, not other people in his business and his family. Leadership. The ultimate success and profitability of your company rests with you. If you are the owner and manager and leader of your company, your leadership is what's going to determine your success. And we have to look at what are your leadership styles. And I know that, are you a director? Are you a coach? Are you a supporter? Are you a delegator? Are you a dictator? Whatever your style is, you have to learn to match the style with the level of your employees, the level of experience and training. And when new employees are on board, it definitely needs to be directing. But as you get a more mature staff, then it's more coaching and supporting. And with a real experienced staff, you really need to learn to delegate. And these are all things we talk about and do in my leadership workshops that really, have you take a close look at your leadership potential as well as your style. And we use assessments to figure out where you're at. And lastly, do not forget your health. It is so important for you to set aside time in the morning, later in the day, on weekends. In order to achieve your goals, you have to be healthy. And I follow a pretty strong regimen in the morning with some Tai Chi, some meditation, stretching, yoga, and I have 2 conditioning classes as well as 2 track practices that I do Thursdays and Sundays later in the day. I'm involved in the Senior Olympics, and I've qualified for the nationals in the shot, the discus, the hammer, and the javelin. And I never thought I would, at 64, I would be able to be competitive again, but who knew? And I am enjoying it. It's giving me something that I can do to train for the rest of my life, not just for these track events. And lastly, grow an attitude of gratitude. There are so many people around us that depend on us, and you know, I have found that my gratitude for my family, my friends, my clients, my employees has just got me through a lot of success. And this is my grandson, Hayden, who stays with me periodically. We have fun. He's got a yoga mat. He comes to my wellness nights. He's just such a lovely kid. Quickly, take home, study the national and local economic conditions to make your business plan. A sustainable business will require that you know all of your costs, have an estimating system, and certainly a budget. Know what your overhead is and set profit goals. Organic and eco-friendly landscaping offers many opportunities, residential, public, and commercial. You can market organic services as safe, viable program that works and a profit center for your company. Make personal wellness a priority. Schedule time for family, vacations, and yourself. Embrace change. Stay focused and grow an attitude of gratitude. We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. One of my favorite historical characters, Winston Churchill. I want to thank you all for being attentive through this. I know that Penny's going to submit or ask me some questions, and I appreciate. And here is my contact information in case anybody would like to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frank. That was very, very helpful and informative. We do have a few questions. The first question is, have you seen any financial analysis on the difference in bottom lines for companies practicing sustainable versus traditional landscape practices?
The companies that I've worked with, and I've worked with both traditional and organic, there are some very profitable companies with traditional and some very profitable with organic. I think it's not so much whether it's organic or traditional, it's the people that are running the companies. How organized are they? Do they have systems in place? So I have not seen organic being more profitable than traditional or vice versa. It's really the the business and the people running the business as much as it is the type of business.
Okay. Are there any resources that you can point to, either your books or online resources for job estimating tools? You showed us some very good examples of work that you've done, obviously, as a result of many years of experience. Can you point our listeners to some tools to help with this?
Yeah, as just, again, this is a personal plug, but I think it has been very effective for a lot of businesses. The second book that I published, The Essential Business Handbook for Horticultural Companies, has practically all of the information that you need to begin a business, how to establish estimating, how to do marketing, how to hire employees, how to develop a business plan. It's probably one of the first places that I would recommend. And anybody that wants additional information, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to get back to you with some other resources.
Okay. The next question is about your equipment. Do you use electric or propane landscape equipment, and or have you seen any statistics on the return of investments for going with these?
I have several large properties that I subcontract to another landscape mowing company, and he uses traditional. But I have already investigated, and I've actually had them come to a local lawn mower store, and they've done demos, and they're electric. And they've worked absolutely perfectly. The problem is they have not been able to meet the demand in terms of production. So we're probably still a year, maybe 2 years away from the electric equipment. But the return on investment, the key is how minimal maintenance and fuel and tune-ups and oil, all of those things are minimized, and there is a return on investment. It may take a little longer than, you know, the traditional, but the benefits to the environment and as a marketing tool to your customers really, I think, is an opportunity I want to take. I just haven't been able to get the equipment yet.
All right, thank you. The next one actually segues into another marketing question. What's the most effective marketing tool that you would recommend for a small organic firm moving into a new service area?
One of the things, there are several, but one of the best ways that you can get into that market is to find out some of the local environmental organizations, garden clubs, and make a presentation. And a lot of these organizations are desperate for really good speakers, and with your area for your farm, you really will be talking to potential clients, and that to me is a great way to start. Another thing that I have found really effective is in that area or community is find an area where you can establish maybe an organic planting, using native plants, and be able to put up a little sign on, you know, who has landscaped this area. And I found years ago we did that at a busy intersection in Pawcatuck, Connecticut, near Evans Mobile gas station, and it resulted in, we did it for about 6-7 years, and it generated over 199 major projects, immense publicity, and just, you know, was such a positive marketing opportunity for us. And, you know, certainly if you can get, you know, an email list, generate a newsletter, those are more supplemental after you get, you know, some projects. But those would be a couple ways that I would recommend.
All right, thank you for that. Are the costs, both time and financial, for certifications like NOFA OLC or LEED certification, in your opinion, worth the time and money, or the long time or the short term? Are there enough clients who care about these things to really make that much more money?
Because I am an AOLCP for NOFA since 2005, and I would highly recommend that certification for a number of reasons. There are a lot of potential customers that are going to go to the NOFA website looking for AOLCPs if they're interested in organic. One of the other things that I talked about very early in the talk was that when it comes to marketing, for you to separate yourself from other people that may be doing quote-unquote organic. If you are an AOLCP, you have, the power of that certification and the network of NOFA, organic practitioners. And all you would have to do is get, 1 or 2 jobs after you become certified via, the marketing that can be done, by NOFA itself, that you would more than pay for your investment.
Excellent. And we're going to take one last question here, and this is on resources. You mentioned your books. Are there samples of the spreadsheets that you showed in your books? And if so, where are your books available?
My books are available on Amazon directly through me. Contact me via email. And I also have the spreadsheets in Excel forms, and I usually put them in a package of, 8 or 10 of the different ones. And if people contact me, I'm happy to make arrangements with them and let them see what I have to offer.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Frank, for sharing all of your years and experience and all of these tools and techniques for evaluating and running our businesses. I'm sure this is going to be very valuable for lots of our listeners. And thank you all for attending this webinar. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Good evening and good gardening to you all.